Hello, everyone, and welcome back to JaianMusic Notes, the podcast where music meets memory, where soundtracks speak, and where I take you behind the scenes of anime music. My covers, and today I am joined by a wonderful guest who was with us before. This person's technically third appearance on the show. He was with us on episode 9 and 10, where we discussed Zankyou no Terror. I am joined by the marvelous electroacoustic composer, Morgan Caswell. How are you, Morgan?
I am good. Thank you. I feel very honored and humbled with that intro. The marvelous. I think that's the first time I've heard that one. Very nice.
It has to start with an M. It has to roll off the tongue, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, of course. But always a pleasure, Jaian. Always a pleasure. And I'm excited. We're also doing a bit of a sequel to the last one too, which is exciting.
Very much so. Today, we're exploring a little topic I had floated to Morgan a while back. We're exploring something very special, a musical dialogue between two beautiful works, Sigur Rós' album Tak from 2005 and Yoko Kanno's original score for Zankyou no Terror. Why these two? Before I get into that, I want to thank the sponsor of JaianMusic Notes, Laser Audio Technologies. Whether you're crafting cinematic scores, lo-fi chillscapes, or if you're a composer, a content creator, Laser Audio Technologies has you covered. They have amazing plugins such as Fram and Glow. And if you use code JaianMusic, you get 30% off at checkout. So how do you connect the two? Let's before we, because I know there's like thematic connections between albums of Sigur Rós and everything, but before we go into that universe and everything, like Watanabe has spoken on Tak and Sigur Rós and the influence between these two that generated the idea for Terror and Resonance, and you can hear it in the soundtrack. So how, for beyond that, how do those two connect?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, one of the coolest things about the two is that, so Terror and Resonance, or Zankyou no Terror, basically is a story that is all about, like memory and childhood. It's a show with a lot of flashbacks, a lot of baggage, and a lot of things that people carried into them. You get a lot of scenes that are almost like dream-like flashbacks, and the Sigur Rós, specifically this album, it also is it feels like a collection of memories, and a lot of the songs paint a lot of very images of childhood, images of nostalgia and stuff like this, and so that's one of the main ways where I think the two connect. There's a very sort of like there's a nostalgic element to both, but there's also a very sort of like there's a very childlike nature to both. And also I will also say, like, there's there's a very childlike nature to both. I feel like with the idealism of the characters of Terror, and meshes very well with the sort of sound that Sigur Rós builds in this specific album, which influences, in turn, Terror. And so, I'd say that's the main thing, is like the sort of like playing with memories, playing with sort of like a childhood, like nostalgic lens is the main connection that you can get, like sonically and thematically from the two projects. And I know that Watanabe, he was listening to Sigur Rós, and he could see the images, of the characters for this show, and I think that's really speaks to the power of this album and of the way that Sigur Rós compose, because they compose creating images through the emotion of the music, not necessarily through the words. And I think that's a power that really carries into Terror and Resonance, because a lot of Watanabe's work has music forward, and a lot of his work uses mood and not necessarily having characters talk about how they're feeling and the thesis of what the character is, but more using the whole package, the visuals, the music, the sound, and everything to tell you a little bit more, right, about what you're supposed to be feeling beyond just, you know, having a character sit down and tell you, hey, this is my trauma, this is my baggage. And I feel like that sort of like storytelling, that imagery that Sigur Rós brings is something that comes into Yoko Kanno's work very much so in Terror. So
yeah, and I think like when you listen to the soundtrack, from what I understood, like this soundtrack was composed in Japan, recorded in Iceland, and there's like a similar air that is breathed between these two works. They both have like emotional desolation, and I also felt that sonically there's like this shimmering softness in Sigur Rós's album, like throughout. It almost feels like there's like a reverb that kind of just stayed the whole time. Like it just kind of lingered the whole time. It's majestic. But
it feels like
tone that I love.
I find that this album specifically from Sigur Rós, and this is true of certain of especially like this album, is that the reverb and the kind of washiness of the sound, and also there's a lot of tones that feel like you're out in nature. Like some of the tracks sound like, you know, you're in the forest and there's a marching band passing. And the thing about this is I find that like this album sounds very distant in sound. Like you're hearing it, but you're not just hearing it, you know, in a studio. It's not just creeping into your ears like at a close distance. It feels like you're in a space and the music is coming at you from behind that space. And I find it adds a very like pretty quality to it, and it also adds to like the sort of like memory theme, because that kind of distance is something where it feels almost like the music is a recollection. You know, it's pieces that come together as you listen, and that sort of like come from a distant place, but that comes closer to you. We'll talk about that on when we talk about specific songs, because you'll see exactly what I mean when we get there.
When you speak of like ambiences, I remember there's like actual Zenki no Terror songs where there's like just like ambiences, and then we just have like that piano chord hitting with like the vocals shimmering over them. So they went from the same sonic palette here.
Yeah,
the same sonic palette is applied, and obviously TAC came before Terror and Resonance. It's like a 9-year difference, I think.
Oh yeah,
but like I really like the idea when Watanabe said like the initial image of the show came like drawing from listening to Sigur Rós, where you have like those two children on a pile, like looking at rubble, and that's like, okay, I really understand that more, because like it's really funny. When I was recording this last episode with you, I was like, oh, like Terror Resonance is the reason why I went to visit Iceland, and now I came back from Iceland, and I get it. I get it, because when you're out there and you do, like I did the whole spin of the country. I went from north to south, got in the van, did the whole thing. Lovely experience. And there's like a lot of areas with just like rocks for miles and miles, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's like every stop is a new planet. It's incredible. And I feel like ambience is an ambient music only stems and exists and performs well because of that.
Yeah, well, especially because in this album, in Sigur Rós's talk, it's an album where it has a very naturalistic sound palette, right? It's very like it's very airy. It feels like you can hear the leaves falling when you're listening to some of these songs, and the water
super crispy in the high ends. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. But there's something where it's naturalistic in this, but also in its built of ambient scapes. Because I'm not sure if you've listened to some other works, but each album has its own palette and its own kind of sound. And some of them go in more intense and more synthetic or more built aesthetics. In this one, it really feels like with the horns and with the choices of arrangements, they've really created like a lot of pieces of music, like a lot of pieces where a lot of the ambience, everything flows very naturally, very well together, and everything is allowed its proper space. Where some other albums, they have elements that kind of come in to throw you off a little bit, contradict a little bit. But in this one, I feel like all of the pieces this is kind of almost Sigur Rós' pop album in a way, like compared to some of their other works where the melodies are very pretty and everything is made to fit very nicely together. And I think, you were mentioning the image of the two kids, like again, there's a childlike wonder to this album, which I think if I were to, rank the Sigur Rós albums just on pure, which one makes me think of like, eating oatmeal at my grandma's place, this is the album. You know what I mean? This is the one.
Eating oatmeal at my grandma's place.
This is it, right? This is the one where you're like, oh yeah, you do that, and then she goes to take me sleighing. Like that's it. This is the album for that. But I think that's perfect for Terror because, like I said, Terror has a lot of flashbacks, and what happened in their childhood is what carried them all the way to the point of the story. So I think there's something where dealing with like creating this ambient, this sound, and which is nostalgic, but also a bit melancholic, also a bit like nostalgia is a bit sad, right? It's the kind of thing where you love that you don't love that it happened in the case of Terror, it's tough, but it's something where like people feel nostalgia for things that were good, also for things that were bad, because there's those feelings that you have for when you were younger and you're remembering the good through the bad and the good, all this. But there's something where I feel like when you're dealing with like nostalgia, there's an inherent sadness to it. So I know we'll talk about this, but in Sigur Rós, because it really captures the childlike wonder, but in Terror, there's a flip to it where both have childlike nostalgia, but one of these projects has more wonder and the other has more melancholy, a bit more darkness.
Literal destruction. I think you're being too soft when you say melancholy. Destruction. The other one is literally about destruction.
Yes.
It's like one's just like, we have an optimist and we have a pessimist here.
Yeah, exactly.
Like these guitar tones in Terror and Resonance are kind of like, they're recorded like that and it's super indie, I find. Like it's just like, it just sounds wacky in them.
Yeah, and
but 9 is wacky as well, and 12 12 is all sorts of wacky.
And I was listening to both albums, and I was trying to think about like what is one of the bigger differences I can find between the two, and what for you is the biggest difference between Sigur Rós' Tak and Thank You, Terror? I'm curious. This is a fun little question I was excited to ask you.
I know that, to me, like, Sigur Rós influenced most of the album.
Yeah.
Then there's, like, songs, like, in the Terror and Resonance soundtrack, like Saga.
Yeah.
Remember? I don't know if you remember last time we talked about how it felt like a jam. This album does not feel like a jam. This album is, like, crafted to perfection. The tones were searched for days and weeks and weeks in the studio.
Yeah,
I can tell it's detailed out the wazoo.
Yeah.
And I think the other difference is obviously one's melancholic, if you want to be soft and say like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But like one's much more darker.
Yeah.
Those are like the biggest differences for me. But then like
we're on a similar page. Yeah. I was curious if you were gonna have the same as mine, and I think you actually do hit it. So when I was listening to both, I realized that the pace and the feel of the music in Thank You, Terror is much faster, It's
True.
much faster. And
I mean, it's animation too, man.
Yeah,
like,
well,
it's also a
exactly.
show, like
Exactly.
where
So
stuff blows up. Like we can't be like,
exactly.
Like,
So
11 episodes.
So there's something where it's doing everything it can to keep that like ethereal ambience and that the smoothness and
Yes.
of like things like Sigur Rós. But at the same time, like we're on a motorbike. The guitar needs to be a bit faster than what you're gonna get on, like Glossololi. I can't say these names, Glossoli, whatever. But like, you're gonna need to pick up the pace a little bit. And so that's one of the cool things is that when you hear Zankyou no Terror, there's actually a bit of a it adds a bit extra like indie rock guitars, a bit extra like a bit of a lift up to the pace, and that essentially allows it to be as ambient and as spacey as it needs to be, to still have that Sigur Rós influence, that vibe, but also, be about terrorists that are a terrorist anime show. You can't do like Celeste or Milan in a terrorist anime show, like straight up. You're gonna need to pick it up a little bit. So that's the biggest difference. But I think it's cool because it actually comes with it means that like there's something in Zankyou no Terror's music where because of that pace, there's a bit of some tracks like Saga and stuff have almost like a punk rock energy to it. Where Sigur Rós sometimes feels, because it is post rock, it feels like they almost have the attitude of it, but they slowed everything down. So if you do the,
it's like halftime punk rock.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a bit like this because post rock has a lot of that noise rock influence and stuff like this. So
absolutely.
So because of that, I feel like if you ever wanted to do the experiment of what happens if I doubled up a Sigur Rós song, you can hit up the Zankyou no Terror soundtrack and you got it. You got what you wish for.
Or you can make nightcore versions of Sigur Rós songs as well.
Well, you can make nightcore versions of no, not nightcore. You can make like a wave version of Zankyou no Terror, and you'll probably end up in the Sigur Rós plane. If you reverse engineer both, you can somehow get there.
Morgan, just send me your half, and I'll reverse it. Okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Shared DNA is a section I wanted to talk about a little bit here. About because we're talking about the differences here. For me, like I feel like we kind of already touched on it, but the difference here, like I agree, tempo faster over in Zankyou no Terror land.
Yeah,
every day. But emotional pacing.
Yeah,
I think like this album is just so dynamic and so non-linear. Like we go up and down and up and down and up and down. It's a total ride, and I feel like that's the same thing with Terror in Resonance.
Yeah,
there's so many twisted turns that this anime takes. So I feel like the musical and emotional pacing is a very common point. Would you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, I have some thoughts, but I do know that we want to talk later about some of the more like the connections between the narrative elements, the sort of like the story of terror and the quote unquote story of talk.
I mean, you go there if you want to. We have no rules.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, this is a free for all. Yeah, I feel like
that answers my question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I feel like this will segue into that. So essentially, yeah, like so you're right. The emotional pace everywhere. We're going. When you're watching, Zankyou no Terror, there's all of the emotions. You have your goofy moments, but you also like sometimes when it's not very every day where you see like a terrorist who's kind of like a cute anime boy who's smiling, throwing plushie bombs. This is the kind of thing where I'm like, okay, I know that I'm gonna laugh. You're also gonna cry. You're also gonna feel the wide range. But this is something that happens in TAC as well, where you're gonna be listening to the most beautiful 4 minutes of. It feels like you're at the beach and you're 10 years old, and your sandcastle is still standing up in a storm, and it's just this precious memory, right? But then the next track, the circus comes to town for 4 minutes, and I don't know why there's a marching band, horn circus outro for 4 minutes. It's amazing. and it made me laugh the first time I heard it. I thought it was such a crazy ballsy move, but both kind of do that.
Very.
And I think it's something where, so in Terror, of course, they need to be sort of elastic when it comes to the emotions. They need to be able to bounce back and forth to all of these different things, because the anime has a lot of characters with a lot of different, points of view and baggage. So we do need the music to reflect all of these different elements. In TAC, there's not a narrative, right? But there is one thing that I find is very interesting. We haven't talked too much about, like, for example, like the like the titles of the track in TAC, but that kind of is the only real, like, quote unquote, like, thematic or narrative point that you can take from it, because all of the titles are they really heavily feel like details or parts of memories. So there's a song, that translates to hopping into puddles, right? Which is, if that's not a childhood memory, like that's the most I'm a kid and I just got my first pair of water shoes, like, and I'm hopping into puddles, and
Absolutely.
so that's kind of the thing that I find interesting, is that, like, a lot of TAC, the titles, they really echo, like Lost at Sea. I see a train with a nosebleed. Like, some of it is almost random. Like, you're kind of like, okay, like Lost at Sea feels like feels like a children's book, but with a nosebleed feels like, not a good memory. That feels more like, like you just had a nosebleed in gym class and you hid in the bathroom for 30 minutes. But still, I'm giving a lot of comparisons, but that's because Sigur Rós evokes a lot of this stuff, like, this is how I feel when I listen to this music. And
If I may, just like a quick parenthesis here, because we're talking about track names, and I feel like this is the only place where I can mention this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I found myself completely gobsmacked when I'm doing my listen of the full TAC album today.
Yeah.
Because when I went to Iceland and I then decided to continue my vacation elsewhere, I went to track 7.
Oh,
and track 7
nice.
is called Milan, and Milan is where I went.
That's so cool.
And do you know what's crazy?
Yeah.
Do you know how long I took to do the ring road, like not ring road, the whole of Iceland? Like, the first day I got the van to the last day I dropped off the van, how many days it was?
I don't.
7.
Okay.
There's something weird going on. Like,
they're connected. I'm telling you.
I don't want to be a superstitious person, but
no, but if a band's gonna tap into the ether and connect to your brain, it's gonna be this one. At least it feels.
Yeah.
Like it. But it's also that's amazing. That's really cool. And but I do want to mention that the interesting thing about the titles, and this is where I'd like to speak a little bit on. So the interesting thing about the titles is this album. It has these very strong. It has strong imagery in the titles. And Sigur Rós, all of their music, it's usually they build it with the idea of creating a lot of imagery and a lot of narrative through emotions, not through just like the poetry of the lyrics and the songwriting. Everything comes through in the music. They try to build as much space with the music and the arrangements and the sound of it all, and they try to give you as much through that. And what I find interesting is that the previous album, which is the bracket album, they call it. It has 2 titles. I call it the bracket album and that's what most English speakers call it. And the title is actually just 2 brackets. But anyways, so that album actually is all sung in a made-up language, right? Which they also use on TAC. And the made-up language is a gibberish language, so it has no actual meaning. There's no words are real when you listen to the bracket album. Every single song is in that language. And that means that the titles, the songs on that album also have no real titles. It's Untitled 1, Untitled 2, Untitled 3. They do have unofficial titles that people found out, which are what the band calls the songs, but those are not official. And some of the titles, one of them is like Ebo, because they use an Ebo on one of the songs. But anyways, so the interesting thing is that album, that shows exactly that all of the music, all of the imagery, all of the narrative, all of the themes of the piece, they're all made through the music. So when they did Tech, they did exactly a lot of the same things. They're building the space. They're letting the music speak. They're letting all of these things happen. But the difference is now we have all of these titles that give you a starting point. You have, Glowing Soul, which gives you a visual to start, just to begin. And then the music fills out all of that, the rest of that space, right? And so I think that this is something that really ties in well to Zankyou no Terror, because Zankyou no Terror has, if you watch the show, hopefully you've seen the show if you're listening to this, or if
we won't spoil though. I don't want to spoil.
I won't be spoiling anything. I was gonna say though, because specifically I'm talking about the first couple episodes. Like in the early parts of the show, they do something that I find is kind of similar, where in Tak, it's you get the titles of the tracks. They each give you sort of like one single image, like Glowing Soul, Hopping into Puddles, Nosebleed, I See a Train, Lost at Sea, Milan. They give you one thing. And then the rest of the music, these songs, they go for long. They go 8 minutes, 7 minutes. There's a 10-minute track on here. So the thing is they give you a starting point and the rest is filled up by the music. And I think this is the kind of philosophy that you really want to have when you're making a show like Zankyou no Terror, because it's a show with a lot of mystery. And the beginning of the show, it's all giving you, here's a flash of a flashback. Here's one image, and you're not going to know what it means until you hit the last episode. Here's a bunch of small parts, but then they just expand and they build on it. They give you the first episodes, they start every plot thread directly. This isn't a show where it's like, the first 3 episodes is like, that tells its own little story, and then we move. No. Like the first 3 episodes, they build up all of the elements, and then the last 3, it's all about closing those gaps. But this is a show where a lot of the when you rewatch it, which I know you have, and I have, because I own it. But it's the kind of show where every time you rewatch it, you kind of realize, oh yeah, it's a show that presents you with so many small pieces, but that expands, right? And that it uses all of its, like I said, Watanabe is great at this. Yoko Kanno, absolutely amazing at this, of just using the forms of the art to sort of build the ambience, build the themes in a deeper way than simply blurting it out. And that's what Sigur Rós do. That's why they're very cinematic in that way. You listen to their music, half the lyrics are gibberish, half of them are Icelandic. Sometimes I can't tell obviously which is which, because I don't listen, but when I'm following the lyrics and translations, because I like doing that for listening to foreign music, you'll listen to a song on this album and it'll be like, oh cool, the verse is really nice, and then the chorus is actually the made up language, and you realize, oh okay, now I take a step back from the words and I just start feeling the vibe. That's a cinematic quality that Sigur Rós have, and that this album has, that a lot of I think lends itself well to score music. Because in score music you have those moments where when you're scoring something or when you're making music for soundtrack, you have a lot of these moments where the words can't overpower what's happening on screen, right? You can't have a song where I'm distracted because now, the words are, the poetry of it all is kind of in the way. And I feel like this is a really good, anime soundtrack, or a soundtrack of TV show, anything, where there is singing, there is vocals, but it never oversteps its boundary. The voice is used as an instrument, and it really has that sort of it has this thing where it blends perfectly. Like you're watching the bike scene, and they're singing a full song, but you still hear every word that they speak, and you never feel like anything is overpowering. Everything is just very finely tuned in that way. And I know this might have been a bit of a big rant and tangent, but I not rant, but a big sidebar and tangent. But I really
we're
think
on a podcast. This is what we do.
You're right. This is our point. But I do feel
this is literally the one place where you can do. You know what I mean?
This is you're right. This is the point. But yeah, I feel like there's a huge cinematic nature to this album and Sigur Rós's music that I'm surprised. I was gonna say I'm surprised not more more films and shows have been inspired. But there are actually a lot of a lot of films that have included Sigur Rós music in the.
Of course.
It is very quite popular. But what I like about it is Terror. Zancudo Terror didn't do what a lot of other things. 'Cause I think it was like there's an animated movie. I think Mitchell's versus the Machines. I think that that one. Okay, so where they basically use like 2 Sigur Rós songs for the last like 10 minutes. But what I like is Zancudo Terror. It did something wonderful because it took the influence of Sigur Rós, but they did its original compositions and they
it
built
did its
something
own thing.
new, right? And that's something that I think is great because you mentioned at the beginning that art is a conversation, right? That when you create something inspired by something else, it's not about copying, right? It's about continuing the conversation that the previous work left off, right? And that's something that's really that is what art is about. You know, nobody is making anything technically from complete scratch, right? No, you can't be the first painter, you can't be the first musician. So the best thing to do is to kind of know, like sort of like try to add something new to that conversation. And so instead of just because I'm sure he could have gotten the rights to these songs, but Watanabe was lucky enough to have a great collaborator with Yoko Kanno. He's like, hey, I have one of the best composers in the business, probably the best composer in the anime business.
And so all great points, Morgan, and you're giving me a lot of ideas that I want the listeners to stick around for. So next week, part 2 of this conversation, there's still a lot more to get through. Morgan, for the people who would like to follow your work, your music, everything, where can they find you?
They can find me at Morgan the Alien on Instagram, and that's pretty much all they can find for me so far. Most of the work I've done, if you are in the the Montreal region, most of the work that I do is more in some smaller festivals and stuff like this. I've done work for exhibition as well. However, I am currently recording an album that is actually mine. I have about half of it done, and so I've wanted to for a long time sort of make something that I didn't have to, that wasn't made for other people's films and other people's work, and that I could actually release myself, because I don't really want to put on Spotify score works that I've done for others or things that were made for like a commercial or something. So that will happen. But for now, you can follow me at Morgan the Alien, and probably either the end of this year or the beginning of the next year, you can expect some stuff from there. But yeah,
perfect.
That's basically it.
Perfect. I forgot to plug him in at the beginning, but the artwork for the podcast, all done by GoPro Keel. Please go give him a follow. He's the man. He's the best.
Oh, yeah.
I love his work. Go follow at GoPro Keel. Use code JaianMusic, 30% off laser audio technology plugins. And you can follow the podcast on your favorite podcatcher. Just type in JaianMusic Notes. Give us your favorite comments, your favorite animes that you want us to talk about. Everything in the comments. I would love that. 5-star reviews, always appreciated. My website is JaianMusic.com, and I am at JaianMusic on social media. So for myself and Morgan, I will see you in the next episode of JaianMusic Notes. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.